Okay, so I'm going to do a small explanation on domain and range because some of you are having trouble with it on the assignment. So my domain always focuses on the x values. Okay, when it comes to graphs, graphs are either continuous or non-continuous. So when we talk about a graph that is continuous, that means that I have arrows at both the ends of the graphs. Okay, so this is a continuous graph. When I talk about a graph that is discontinuous, that means that there is no arrows at the ends of the graph. You just have the dots that close it off, okay? And at those specific dots, you have specific x values. So for example, this is, let's say, -2, and this is 4. So this is discontinuous. What this means for the domain on the graph that's discontinuous is that there's a lower x value that it goes to, and then there's a higher x value that it goes to, okay? So when it comes to continuous functions, the domain of every continuum function is going to be xer. So when we have continuous functions, the domain is going to be xer. And the reason being is because my graph can keep going and going and going for as long as it wants, okay? Now for my discontinuous graph, the ones with the points at the end, my domain is restricted between certain x values. So for example, if you notice on this one, my graph cannot go to the left of -2 because it's not allowed to and it doesn't go. And we also are restricted at x is equal to 4, which means that my graph cannot go past the x value of 4. So when we have discontinuous graphs, how I'm going to write my domain is going to be like this. So my domain, again, you're going to start with xer, okay? And then you're going to have your such that condition because you are restricted between certain intervals. So what you're going to do first is you're going to write your x in the middle. You're going to write your highest number on the right and your lowest number on the left. Okay? So what we notice first is that I cannot go to the left of -2 on this graph, which means that my x's have to be greater than or equal to -2. And because I cannot go to the right of 4, my x's also has to be less than or equal to 4. So with the discontinuous graph, we have these certain restrictions where I cannot go past a certain point. So for example, here, my domain is xer such that x is greater than -2 and x is less than 4, okay? Because I cannot go past -2 to the left, I cannot go past 4 to the right. Now we have our range. So the range has to do with the y values. Now, the first thing you're going to ask yourself when you're doing a range or when you're trying to figure out the range of the graph is, does my graph have a highest or lowest point? So for example, let's say we have this graph over here. Let's say I have my parabola and my vertex is 2 and 8. So the question that I have to ask myself is, do I have a highest or lowest point? In this case, I have a highest point because I cannot go above a certain number. So again, the range has to do with the y values, which in this case is 8, which means 8 is the highest y value that my graph can go to. And as you can notice, I cannot go higher than 8. I can only go lower than 8. So my range would be, again, y is the elements of all real numbers. So my restriction is that my y values have to be less than or equal to that value of 8. And let's just say if we have a discontinuous graph. So I'm going to draw a discontinuous graph over here. Obviously, you guys would have the numbers filled out already. So let's say my continuous graph starts here and goes here. So because of this continuous graph, this range is going to be a bit different. So remember, discontinuous functions, you're kind of restricted with your domain and range. So in this case, we have a highest and a lowest point. So for example, my y value of 5, that is my highest point, which means that nothing can be higher than 5. And -5 is my lowest point, which means nothing can be lower than -5 on the y values. So my range would look the same as if I were writing the domain. So range is YER. And then I have my restrictions. Put your y in the middle. Your highest number is going to be on the right, and your lowest number is going to be on the left. So my y's have to be bigger than or equal to -5, but they have to be lower than or equal to 5. Okay, so hopefully this clears out a bit of confusion for some of you. So I will post this ASAP.